Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaushik. I'm currently Director for our Grid Technology and Grid Modernization Program at Southern California Edison. Southern California Edison is one of the largest investor-owned electric utilities, serving a population of 15 million customers, over 5 million service accounts in central, southern, and coastal California. The company has been there for over 130 years, providing safe, reliable, and affordable electricity in the US. It's also personally a privilege, and I'm quite excited to be back here. I'm a local graduate of IIT Delhi. I've been in US for past 15 plus years, so coming back here to share some of the learnings and learn from your experiences and knowledge is a privilege to be a part of this conference. So today's topic, we'll talk about integration of electric vehicles by distribution utilities. SCE is a distribution utility. It's an investor-owned distribution utility. So some numbers on Southern California Edison. The utility Southern California Edison is a fully owned subsidiary of Edison International Group of Companies. Within SCE, on the utility side, it's over 12,500 employees. We serve a territory of about 50,000 square miles. You can see a map of California there. The white area on that map is SCE's footprint. We have assets of over 118,000 miles of distribution and transmission lines, out of which about 90,000 is distribution, about 20,000, the remaining 25,000 or so is transmission lines. Last year, we delivered 46% of our energy from clean greenhouse gas emissions-free resources. We also delivered out of that 46% GHG-free energy, 36% of that qualifies as renewables in California. So the renewables and GHG-free is two different terms in California, mostly because of the large hydro. Hydropower above 30 megawatts units do not qualify as renewable, but even though it's GHG-free. And nuclear is GHG-free, but it doesn't qualify as renewable. Edison serves 12 of the Fortune 50 companies. In the Southern California, Los Angeles area is a very vibrant and high economic activity area, and we are fortunate to serve some of the largest, biggest Fortune 500 companies over there. 15 million residents and $12.7 billion in annual operating revenues from our SC and other subsidiaries. So before I get into it, my objectives here are to first give you some background on Edison and where we are, the environment we operate in, then maybe talk about our e-mobility programs, the successes we had, where we are, what are the upcoming programs, and also share a little bit of technical side of what does it take to get the technology going to build a massive electric vehicle infrastructure. Before we get into any of those topics, I want to share why e-mobility. Why is it that, what's the bigger purpose here? What are we after? So it's really about greenhouse gas reductions, and it's about climate change goals. California today has, if you look at this chart, of total greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors in the economy, we are at about 450 million metric tons of CO2. That's about the same on where we were in 1990 levels. So it's not bad. We are a little bit below that, actually, from 1990. You can see 2017, we were back at same level, and now we have dropped a little bit to 2019. Considering population of California has increased by 10 million people from 1990 to the 2018 time period. The state has set up very aggressive GHG reduction goals that we want to reduce these total greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors in the economy from the current level, which is about same as 1990 level, 40% below that by the year 2030. And if we can do that, and if we just extrapolate that line, you can see that we can go 80% below that level by the year 2050. That's the broad purpose here. That's what we are trying to do. Governor Brown also signed an executive order, B4818, where he increased the target for zero emissions vehicles to 5 million by the year 2030. So to give you more numbers here, 36 million Californians today drive about 26 million light-duty vehicles, burning billions in diesel and gasoline every day. If you put at 5 million for that 25, 26, that's about 1/5 of the volume. That's really the target here from a state political leadership perspective. Edison has even higher and more ambitious targets, so I'll talk about that a little bit. But before we get into just the transportation, we wanted to look at where do these emissions come from? What is causing these greenhouse gas emissions, 450 million metric tons of CO2? You can see this pie chart here that the largest contributor is transportation sectors. Almost 40% of the entire GHG emissions are coming from transportation sectors. This is California in numbers. Industrial and commercial and residential sectors trail not too far behind as well. Electric power is actually about 19% of this sector. And it's a sector from yesterday's sessions that I think the theme is same, that electric power has done most to reduce GHG emissions through increasing penetration of renewables and cleaning the portfolio. So what would not be fair to say is because we want to reduce GHG emissions, we go to any one of these sectors and say no more GHG emissions for you. Right? That will not be good for economy, that will not be good for customers. The right thing to do here would be to understand what would be a reasonable, affordable way in order to reduce emissions from all of these sectors. So Southern California Edison published a white paper back in November 2017. We call it the Clean Power and Electrification Pathway. It's a 12-page white paper. You can download, read it in 20 minutes. It's on sce.com/innovation. And later on, we publish an appendix with a whole bunch of data behind it. What we did was we modeled current numbers on where we are to where we want to go by 2030, and we model a whole bunch of different scenarios. We model a hydrogen-based economy, electric vehicles-based economy, different levels of renewable penetration, different levels of energy storage, and the objective function was to minimize the cost for the customers, for Californians. What is the most affordable way for us to get from where we are to 40% below GHG emissions? The solution we came up with, the most optimal solution there is a three-part solution. The first part is to deeply decarbonize the electric sector. Currently, we are 46% clean portfolio. We want to get from that 46% GHG-free to 80% GHG-free by the year 2030. So most of the energy on the grid will be from greenhouse gas emissions-free, carbon-free. We have all this infrastructure out there. We are a distribution utility, a transmission utility. We do generate some of our own power. We buy 80% of our power from third-party contracts. Our peak load is about 24 gigawatts, for those of you who are interested. Annual sales about 85 terawatt hours. So we have all this infrastructure, poles, wires, transformers. Why not just use this 80% clean energy, not just for our lights and air conditioners and computers and iPhones at home, but use it to power the transportation as well? So the most optimal solution came up with 80% clean energy, 7 million electric vehicles for California. If you recall Governor Brown's vision there, that was 5 million. So we are going even more aspirational here. And 1/3 of commercial building and residential buildings, heating and cooling load to be electrified. So that came up as the most optimal solution. Each sector gives up a little bit. Overall, it stays affordable for the people of California in what the total cost of the utilities and cost for these services would be. That was really our clean power electrification pathway 2 years ago. First in kind back then, a visionary paper that came out. So theme here is we have been a highly regulated monopoly electric utility for over 130 years, but with this disruption, we want to embrace this disruption, and we want to electrify, help the renewables growth, and modernize our grid, and adopt the EV vehicles today. So to give you more numbers, before I get into the transportation electrification pathway here, where are we today? We, in Southern California, are at a point of inflection. I say that in last year, in summers, the 10% of all new car sales in Los Angeles areas were battery electric vehicles. If you think about 10%, that's getting to a serious number. Innovation typically starts at very small numbers, 1%, 2%, 3% for a long time, and the curve typically takes that point of inflection around 10% time period. So you can see that there is a lot of energy and excitement in this area. The transportation electrification pathway, the 7 million vehicles I talked about, here is the breakup. So 7 million out of the 26, 28 million cars projected by then will be 24% of the cars and light-duty trucks, plus 15% of medium-duty and trucks and vans, that's 180,000, plus 6% of heavy-duty trucks and buses. If you add all of those up, light-duty, medium-duty, and heavy-duty, you're looking at removing 17,000 tons of NOx, 58 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. 58 million metric ton out of the 450 million metric ton. Now you're making a dent into that GHG part. So that's really the vision we have, and everything we do aligns towards delivering this vision. So now the question is, what are we doing, and what is the role of a distribution utility like Southern California Edison? What can we do? Three-part solution again: affordability, availability, and awareness. Affordability is important because if it is not low cost as compared to other options, it's not going to make sense for the customers. So providing charging station rebates to commercial and residential customers, keeping it affordable for them. And it's not just those who have single-family houses who can charge at their home in their garages. It's for multi-family development. It's for workplace charging, people so that they can charge during the day, and we can actually help that duck curve problem we have where we have minimum load during the day when solar is really high. That would be a perfect time to charge electric vehicles. We are investing on the customer side infrastructure. Distribution utilities typically, historically, have only cared till the point of meter service drop. And that's what we engineer, we plan, we build, we rate base it. We are going further beyond that meter. We are offering special rates for EV charging. So making, to the question of point of what Ghanshyamji was saying, the tariffs is an area. Infrastructure, who will own the charging stations, who will develop it? That's one big question. Tariffs, how much they will pay for it? That's the second big question. So I'll hit on those two as we go through this. Availability is the other one. Building out a capitalized charging infrastructure for light-duty vehicles, passenger vehicles, in apartments, in shared multifamily units, in public locations, parks, in shopping malls, commercial freight vehicles for, we have one of the biggest port in Southern California area. Port of Long Beach is a heavy point of entry for all the commercial goods from China, from South Asia, coming into the United States, for all of the United States. They come through the Port of Long Beach in the Los Angeles area, and from there, it goes through ground transportation to different parts of Western US. So, so providing commercial freight vehicles electrification and charging across those interstate freeways. Transit buses is another area. If we clean that part and reduce the emissions from transit buses, provide that infrastructure, that would help clean our communities and our cities. Awareness is the other part. Customers typically sometimes are scared, they are not informed, they are not aware of all the opportunities they have. So providing that market education and outreach programs, doing that proactively, running broad and targeted advertisement. So the first, actually, the picture I showed you here is a picture of a bus stop, and it shows these kind of targeted advertisements all over the city, making the EV look cool on signboards, on bus stops, and posters in conferences. That's being part of it. And then providing fleet customer support and advisory services. So what does that mean? Let's dive into all three. But before we got there, before these customers program came in, technology played a huge role behind it. Part of my role is I am the director of Grid Technology Organization. We have over 100 engineers in that organization, and we have 12 research labs. One of the research labs that we have is called Electric Vehicle Testing Center. That's the first image on this slide on the left side. It was, we built this lab back in 1993, 25 years ago, when e-mobility was, at best, was basically a dream. It was one of the first 2 electric vehicle drive testing lab in the entire United States. It was funded by Department of Energy, QVT grants. There were only 2 that were funded at that time. And we basically used it to partner with a lot of OEMs as they were coming up with EVs or testing infrastructure. We would test it here, evaluate it, help to select SCE's fleet. We would select the cars, the trucks that our linemen use. We started electrifying those to begin with. We deployed the world's largest EV fleet, demonstrating millions of miles of actual EV mileage. That was more than 15 years ago. So back then, there was so much research and technology that went behind it. First V1G pilots were done, vehicle-to-grid integration. First battery charging efficiency standards were researched and published here. Formed auto industry and utility collaboration to join power quality standards, and completed a lot of demonstration projects for vehicle-to-grid. We had a pilot project with our US Department of Defense Air Force Base, where we did vehicle-to-grid pilot charging and discharging for market services for their whole fleet of vehicles during the day. We also demonstrated to industry critical elements of EV charging, the program, EV test procedures for power and communication system, and developed first energy management system that was required for the EV programs. Also did a lot of work in heavy-duty truck and bus electrification. So behind this 25 years of testing, standards, publications, working with vendors, doing V1G, V2G, and different levels of chargers, level 1, level 2, DCFC, That then led to some of the results. So where are we today? Passenger vehicles, entire United States today has about 1.1 million electric vehicles, out of which 588,000, almost half of it, 48%, is in California. Out of that 588,000, about 190,000 electric vehicles are in SCE service territory, in our customers. SCE currently provides up to $1,000 rebates per vehicle, whether the customer purchases it or leases it, and we have distributed 63,000 of these rebates to our customers, totaling $29 million. As part of our Charge Ready program, we have installed 1,250 level 2 charging ports across our service territory at 78 sites. These are mostly multifamily units, apartment buildings, workplace sites, public places like shopping malls, so that everyone has access to it. It's not just the people who own a house, who have a property where they can buy and install the EV. If you put it at a public place, anybody has access to it. University campuses have access to it. Transit vehicles, we have done at least 30 charging ports over there, and there's more coming. We've also partnered with the Long Beach, Port of Long Beach, and we've started to electrify the rubber tire gantry trains, which are used to move the containers. There's millions of containers in their yard there. Hundreds of thousands of these show up every day, and there was a lot of fossil fuel being burned, one of the environmentally disadvantaged community there. We're slowly starting to electrify that. This also means load growth. It's good for the utility, but it's also good for the environment because it reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So in terms of how it has scaled up, on the left side, you see US utility investment in level 2 chargers. The entire investment is of the order of about $1 billion, 1,000 million here. You can see out of that, 77% of most of that is in California, and Edison is about half of it. Pretty big part of how much utilities have invested in the EV infrastructure. In terms of how we have scaled up, you can see from 2016, 17, 18, 19, it used to be pilot programs. The EV SC lab I showed you, some of the demonstration projects we did, those are the light colored gray bars. We switched from those pilots, once we had the standards, once we have partners with OEMs, into the yellow part, which is the Charge Ready project, as well as Charge Ready transport. So these are the state regulated CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission approved pilot programs for SCE, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. But the expectation is, as we built out infrastructure using it, in the later years, the market will become more efficient, and there will be mass market deployment, that we will not need rate-based funded programs to continue this growth and acceleration. So in terms of Charge Ready, what we did was, the program basically covered the cost for service drop, meter, panel, circuit, dedicated to the EV charging. Everything from the transformer to the service to the meter, customer meter. Typically, this is where utilities stop. We went further there. We created, on the panel side, conduits, wires, trenches on the customer side, basically everything ready for the charging stations to be plugged in. So 1,250 ports, as I talked about, in over 70 sites have already been installed. That was the Charge Ready pilot program. Some lessons learned from Charge Ready. This was rate-based funded, by the way, $33 million program, supported by our regulators to get this electric vehicle volume going and get the charging station equipment going in our service territory. Even though once we finish that entire customer metering panel up to the charging stations, customers require quite a bit of time to procure the EVSEs, electric vehicles service equipment. We had a requirement for 10 charge port minimum just to make sense of it for the amount of investment you're putting in the infrastructure. There is a base cost component to it, which was a little bit complex to understand in the beginning. We also wanted to have a demand response component in it. So that was a requirement of this state-funded program, that in case there is a demand on the distribution grid or the wholesale grid, the customers who are connected will participate in that demand response, that we can interrupt their charging, and they do get compensated in a way for that. And once the event is gone, then we'll continue the charging. There was no reverse power injected into the grid, but it was a demand response program if there's a need on the grid. The customers who will participate in the demand response will get a lower charging rate versus the ones who don't. Multi-unit developments had unique challenges, and we had basically a lot of learnings and getting to know our customers, our service territory, the challenges you encounter as you try to deploy these electric EVSEs and Charge Ready on mass scale. So a little bit about Charge Ready transport. This is about the transportation sector. We got, this is now available, we got approval for a total program budget of $356 million. We've achieved, target is to achieve minimum of 870 sites with about 8,490 electric vehicles either procured or converted into pure electric. It will cover cost of the entire infrastructure up till the charging station rebates for transit, school buses, and we want to cover it in disadvantaged communities. So there's a timeline and process here for customers to apply for this funding. It's available, over $350 million. Within 2 to 3 months, with some initial study, we will reserve a set of funding for the customer if they apply to have this infrastructure on their site. Then they will have 45 days to show that they are under negotiation, they are trying to procure the equipment needed for their site. Once they have completed that transaction, then they have 6 to 9 months to design and build, and then they'll receive the rebate within a month after that. What other things we are doing to promote electric vehicles in our service territory? We are also doing advisory services through transportation electrification and also project management services. We do fleet analysis services for large customers, so FedEx, UPS, Home Depot, Walmart, anybody who has a large fleet of vehicles or other commercial companies out there. We would analyze their fleet, their cost of operating it, what would it take for them to electrify, what kind of infrastructure is needed, how can they get access to most of the rebates available and the programs that are available to them. We will do fueling calculation, rate analysis, recommend to them the best utility tariff. We have dozens and dozens of different rates. I'm sure you have it's a complex area, the tariffs and rates area. We also have a special EV charging rate. Only the customers who have electric vehicles qualify for it. You could connect with the same meter. For example, I drive an electric car. At my house, I have a single meter for my entire house, but also for my electric vehicle. But because they know I have an EV and they can see that through the smart meter data, I qualify for a special EV rate for the amount of energy usage I do. I can switch to the EV time of use where overnight charging, early morning charging is super cheap, and I can charge my car during that time rather than late afternoon or evening when the demand is really high. Having these programs being available to our customers, providing some of these services, that has encouraged them to consider this in big scale. Other things that are coming up, so I talked about Charge Ready 1, 33 million, 1,250 ports, and what we were able to do there. Charge Ready 2 is currently an open proceeding. We have asked for this money from our regulators and permission for it to rate base it. What we are looking to do there is very massive scale. So going from 1,250 level 2 to 32,000 level 2. This will cover the entire footprint of our service territory. At 3,200 workplaces, 32,000 level 2 apartments, multi-unit complexes, 200 DC fast chargers. Certain customers where there are unique challenges for EVs, for example, some apartment buildings, government customers, we would install our own equipment, we will own it, we'll maintain it, up to 4,230 new charging ports. So that'll be something that looks like here on the bottom left. There are special rebates there through the Cal Green Building Code. California is very progressive in this area. The state has passed a zero net energy standard, so all new houses built in Los Angeles area after 2020 or later will have to have a rooftop solar, will have to have zero net energy consumption on an annualized basis. By the year 2030, all commercial buildings, new buildings, will have zero net energy as well. So there are many programs that provides these rebates. So the Charge Ready 2 will cover essentially the same elements that we had in Charge Ready 1, but Charge Ready 1 was a pilot. Charge Ready 2 is way bigger, is 30 to 50 times bigger than Charge Ready 1, and it'll cover our entire territory, provide that infrastructure to hit that 7 million vision. Some other things in play, we have open legislations. These are awaiting approval. So AB 1082 is an assembly bill, 1082 in California's legislature right now. It's looking at no cost or utility-owned infrastructure to serve level 1 or 2 EV charging in schools. Schools is one area we feel strongly about, that the air should be cleaner for the kids to breathe. And if typically cost is an issue, so we are proposing utility-owned infrastructure that we will put in the cost and rate base it for all K-12 schools in our service territory. It'll be a one-time rebate. We'll build the infrastructure and we'll provide level 1 and level 2 charging there. Parks is another area. It keeps our communities healthy and clean. We'll have utility-owned infrastructure there up to for level 2 and DC fast current charging for all California state parks and beaches. So these are awaiting approval, just to give you a glimpse into what's coming ahead. One thing that's currently active is a $1,000 rebate, which has gone up. When I bought my electric car, it used to be a $450 rebate. And since then, we have upped this rebate. Over 60,000 customers have taken this rebate. They could buy a used electric car or a new electric car. They could lease it or buy it. They would qualify for a $1,000 cash rebate. The other thing they could also do is, if they want to get on a pure electric vehicle tariff program, they could request a separate smart meter just for charging the EV, then their entire house, and then they would qualify for a $1,500 additional rebate above this $1,000 for installing that second smart meter for charging their EV. This program has been really popular as well. So all those things, the engineering, the lab work that we have done, our engineering my engineering team has done on testing on V1G, V2G, DCFC standards, communications protocols, that feeds into the programs, the partnership with the vendors, the communications with our customer, partnership with the regulators, with legislatures in getting these going. That's really targeted to reduce the emissions here. This is a typical map of Los Angeles rush hour freeway. If you have been there, you will really curse it. 6 million IC engines are sold in US every year. So successfully decarbonizing this sector can really help us in achieving our clean energy future. Thank you very much.